Hey everybody, happy Monday. Now, I'm always pretty excited on these Monday morning videos, as you know, but today I'm especially excited because last week I made a video about how I develop spoken fluency in a foreign language, at least to sort of a basic or intermediate level of fluency, without really relying or depending on native speakers or tutors. And I have to say, the reaction to that video has been truly phenomenal. It's my most successful video on my channel ever. I'm just so delighted that, I'm seeing an enormous amount of growth and there's so many new people here. But most of all, I'm just delighted that so many people seem to have deeply resonated with the topic, with the video, and it seems to have really helped a lot of you. So thank you all and welcome if you're new here. Now, today we're gonna be sort of doing a follow-up on that topic because in the comments of that video, some people raised a perfectly valid question, which is, well, if you're, developing this sort of basic level of fluency without relying on, talking to tutors and native speakers on a regular basis, well, how do you know that what you're saying is accurate? Aren't you just training yourself to speak incorrectly? Well, actually, no. This is actually a really interesting topic, and I have a whole method that I use for mitigating this problem. Typically, when I, finally really start talking to native speakers, when I start getting out there after this process, people are usually really surprised at how well and how accurately I speak. So without further ado, let's grab our Monday morning coffee. Cheers, I'm so excited you're here. Let's jump into another awesome video. Okay, so first of all, if you haven't seen that previous video about how I develop spoken fluency without talking to people, I highly recommend you watch that first because I'm gonna be referencing that in this video and I'm not gonna explain everything again. So I'll leave a link to that right here and also down below. So the first thing I want to note here is that there is no perfect solution here, right? There's no perfect solution to, completely avoiding mistakes. And I think that's a bad goal to have. None of us are going to be perfect. And remember, what we're talking about here is getting to that point of sort of basic or even intermediate fluency. There's still plenty of stuff after this, right? This is just how I develop a pretty good speaking ability so that then I can go out and talk to native speakers and I can start to create lots of wonderful opportunities already having the ability to speak to them. And after that, there's still lots of time, right? Most of my speaking experience in French, it came after I got to that sort of pretty decent fluency by myself. Then I had loads of experiences, right? So I don't think that you should be searching for a perfect way to avoid mistakes. And let's also note that if you're working with a tutor and you say an incorrect sentence and the tutor gives you the correct version, that also doesn't mean you're gonna speak perfectly, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to then perfectly mimic the sentence. This is a process. The second thing that's important to note is that the entire time while I'm doing all the activities I described in the previous video, I'm doing an enormous amount of input, and the better I get, the more input I'm doing, and the better equipped I am to absorb that input. So yes, while I am, a lot of the time trying to create my own language, I'm trying to produce my own sentences, I'm still doing it based on an enormous amount of input, and I'm trying my best to mimic that. But here's where things get really interesting. So you may have noticed if you've watched a lot of my videos and my content that I'm pretty big on a particular type of note-taking, which is that I am constantly grabbing phrases and sentences that I really like, things that I know I'm gonna want to say. And I'm gonna show you today in my laptop exactly how this applies to mitigating, making mistakes when developing fluency. But I wanna say first that part of this comes from having learned so many languages in this way. You start to get a really good sense for the types of sentences that you're going to want to say, the kind of sentences you're going to need. So as I'm going through even things like a Babbel course, right? I've shown before how when I'm studying Babbel, if they have the language I'm learning, I'll sort of bring over every phrase and sentence and idiom, every pattern, anything that I see during those lessons that I think, yes, I want that. That's going to be helpful. And sometimes the phrases that I bring over to my Notion space, which I'm going to show you in a second, the words themselves might be kind of random and they might not be that important. Maybe I see a sentence that's like, I eat apples twice per day. Well, I don't really care about the word apple necessarily, especially in the beginning. I'll still bring the sentence though, because it shows me how to say this idea of twice per day, right? And then I could extrapolate that and I could, say things like 3 times per week, once per year, right? So I'm often bringing over things based on the structure, right? Or collocations, or I want to see which preposition goes with a certain word, right? This is especially important in languages like German, but it's across the board. The point is, what I'm doing is I'm creating a database of correct, accurate, natural language for the most part. Now, this is so powerful, right, for developing spoken fluency in the way I described in the last video. So let's jump into my laptop and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so here you can see a familiar page, right? I've shown this before. This is my German page inside of Notion, and I made a whole video tutorial about how to build a complete language learning system inside of Notion, so I'll also link that in the description. But this has grown quite dramatically since last time you saw it, right? Because I'm doing this every single day. And basically what we have here is a massive list of phrases, sentences, again, some idioms, some individual words if I really think, I want to make sure I grab that. But this is mostly sentences. And there's so much stuff in here. There's things like this, I do a lot of sport in order to keep fit, right? There's this idea of to keep fit. And very often I will embolden things like that. Or maybe, this is interesting, a lot of, right? To get up early, although, like, there's so much in here. And you might think some of these sentences are pretty random, right? Things like und dazu. Well, this was from a dialogue about food, and they were asking, and to go with it, what would go with this food? Again, if you think about it, that's actually kind of an interesting thing. Like that may differ, the way of expressing that in different languages. So I have that here, right? We have a bread roll left, right? Now, I don't care about the word for bread roll, but this is interesting. This ability to say something is remaining, something's left, right? So, or this, hopefully it won't rain. Again, I just have so many things here. Let's look at this. See you, we probably would say at the weekend. This came from the translation in Babbel, but that's quite interesting. Bis zum Wochenende, right? Like, so this idea of at the weekend. How do they express that in German? There's this really interesting construction here. So again, the point is, this is a database of accurate, correct language for the most part. So then what happens is, when I start speaking to myself, right? Let's say, in fact, here's a good example. Let's say it's Monday, right? And I want to talk to myself about the weekend. And I say, also, on the weekend? On the Wochenende, I'm not sure, what is that? On the Wochenende habe ich etwas again gemacht, right? So I'm trying to speak and 2 gaps came up, right? It turned out I wasn't sure how to say on the weekend or at the weekend. And I also struggled to remember, how do you say again, right? I wanted to say I did something again on the weekend. Well, let's go to my database, right? So first off, if I were to say, let's say I did this here, weekend, got a few different things here. Okay, here's the one I want. Okay, zum Wochenende, right? Or am Wochenende, right? There's a few different examples in here, I think, if we go through again. And so, cool, that's really helpful. Then I was a bit confused about the word, to do something again. Well, look at this, nicht schon wieder das Schloss, right? I have a few different examples in here, right? that are all this sentence. Again, hat schon wieder meinen Computer benutzt, right? So now I can use this database and I can say something like, whether it was like zum Wochenende or am Wochenende habe ich etwas schon wieder gemacht, right? I don't know if these are completely accurate, but here's the magic. The magic of this method is that if you start to rely completely on a tutor or a native speaker to give you every single correct sentence, right? So throughout the week, you collect some things, you go to your tutor, they give you the correct sentences, and then you study those sentences, right? What very often happens, and I've seen this over and over again, is that people actually become dependent on native speakers to tell them what is correct. And what happens is that when they try to speak in a conversation, every time a new sentence comes up, a sentence they've never seen or never said before, they panic, right? Because they get so worried about being correct all the time, about being perfectly accurate. And there's this dependency, that you need a tutor or a native speaker to tell you every correct sentence. With this method, the reason why it's so powerful, in my opinion, is that as I showed you, you might think that, okay, 148 sentences, that's not that much. There's no way you're gonna have the exact sentence that you wanna say in this database. But the thing is that even with just 150 sentences, and by the way, this very quickly will grow to 300, 400, 500 sentences. But even now, it's very likely that I might have 2 or 3 different entries here that I could piece together and reword to get the sentence that I want. And this is such a powerful exercise because this is what makes you an independent conversationalist in the language, right? You start to get comfortable with the fact that, well, if I see a new sentence that I haven't seen before, I don't know exactly the correct way, but I have these pieces that I know are correct. So you get really good practice at constructing new sentences using stuff that you already know. And by the way, this is essentially the exact process we go through as we start to become highly advanced or even near native speakers. Over time, whichever way you learn a language, over time, you're gonna have certain phrases, patterns, constructions, idioms, collocations that you get so familiar with that they're correct, right? You get really comfortable with these things. But you're never gonna know every single sentence that you ever want to say. But what happens is, as we get really highly advanced, we have enough of these patterns that we know really well that we're able to say a brand new sentence we've never said before, but we can piece together these different patterns that we're comfortable with, and we still are able to produce correct, accurate language for the most part. So when you use this type of method, that's what you're practicing. You're practicing becoming independent and comfortable with the fact that you might not be perfectly correct, but you can piece together these different things that you know, and you can use that to express new ideas. And again, I just want to say one last time, remember that even with this is just a way to develop that basic level of fluency, getting to the point where you're comfortable going out and speaking to people and you can get through a conversation. And if you find a roadblock and you're not sure how to say something, you can still find ways around it. You can find a way to express your ideas, and you can also get to a point where you're able to comprehend really well, because again, you're doing lots and lots of input during this whole process. But I also find that becoming comfortable manipulating sentences in the way I described previously, it helps you bring in that input more effectively, because your brain gets really comfortable with the grammatical structure and the patterns of the language, which makes it cognitively less stressful when you're taking in language, because it just slots into these patterns that you've become comfortable with. And again, most of the speaking that I do, it will come after this, right? So yeah, once I get to this pretty, decent basic level of fluency, First of all, like I said, I have found over and over again that when I do go out and start speaking to people, they're usually very surprised at how well I can speak, and that includes pronunciation and rhythm, because I'm just practicing all the time. It's like being an entertainer or an actor or an actress, right? You're practicing being able to, be convincing, be effective. But again, it's okay if you make mistakes, because that's the moment where I'm gonna start getting a flood of feedback, and I'm gonna start really, honing those speaking skills. I just really find it so liberating and freeing to know that I don't need necessarily to talk to lots of people and have expensive tutoring sessions to reach that point. Okay, everybody, I really hope you found that helpful. I hope this answers all of your concerns and questions about the previous video. But of course, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing, give me a like. And if you have any more questions, comments, or maybe you disagree, leave a comment. I always encourage, friendly and kind discussion. Have a wonderful Monday, and I'll see you back here on Wednesday for another video.